The quiet agony of knowing you were meant for more, but fearing the cost. There is a discomfort that doesn't scream, but corrodes. A discomfort that doesn't paralyze, but empties. It's the feeling that there's something within you that hasn't been born yet, a potential that pulses, but you keep it muffled. Out of fear, doubt, or habit, you feel you were made for more, but you're unsure if you're willing to pay the price. Many adults carry this internal flame that never turned into a wildfire, an unlived potential, a life that could have been, but was postponed in the name of security. Yet security can be a sophisticated form of self-betrayal. Avoiding the inner call may seem like prudence, but it's actually a silent abandonment of oneself. Epictetus reminds us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. True transformation doesn't happen in words but in choices. It's not about what you say you believe, but what you do when no one is watching. Where are you hiding in the name of humility? In which areas of your life do you avoid shining to not disturb others? Think of unshaped iron. It's whole but not yet useful. It has potential but lacks form. It needs fire to transform. Intense heat, precise hammering, patience. Only then does it become a sword, a tool, art. Similarly, you must face the internal fire, the one you fear, to become who you truly are. The fear of exposure, of failure, of judgment often keeps us in comfort zones that are actually prisons. But the pain of not living fully is greater than any risk. True courage isn't about not feeling fear, but acting despite it. This is the moment to look inward and recognize the flame you've been avoiding, to accept that the fire you fear is the same that can forge you, to understand that transformation requires sacrifice, but stagnation demands an even higher price. Are you willing to face the fire, to endure the heat of change, to allow pain to transform you into something stronger, more authentic, more yours? Because in the end, what you fear may be exactly what will make you whole. The discipline behind closed doors. Why greatness is built when no one is watching. There are times when everything inside you begs to stop. There's no audience, no recognition, no one applauds your effort. No one sees the silent battle between what you want now and what you most desire to become. It's in these moments, when the temptation to give up seems justifiable, that true character begins to form. The burning wound is this: what if I give my all and it's still not enough? What if I invest everything? Time, soul, effort, and there's no return? This silent doubt lurks, fed by comparisons you don't admit to making, by the invisibility of your struggles, by that diffuse anguish of not knowing if you're on the right path. But it's precisely here that the soul begins to refine. Stoicism doesn't seek applause, it seeks excellence. And excellence, as Epictetus said, is a reward in itself. It's not about winning in the world, but about conquering yourself, earning the self-respect that only arises when you keep the promise you made to yourself, even when no one else is watching. Create a routine that doesn't feed your ego, but your integrity, a silent, invisible, almost secret discipline. Not to show strength, but to become strong. Because when action ceases to be performance and becomes devotion, something inside you changes. Not quickly, not easily, but profoundly. Imagine a tree growing underground. For years, it doesn't break the surface. No one sees its branches, no one praises its height, but it's there, root by root, preparing to exist with solidity. And when one day it finally breaks the surface, there's no wind that can topple it. This is the discipline that forms great souls, the one built in solitude, in constancy, in silence, on days when you could justify but choose to stay. Because you know, what forges you isn't what you show, it's what you sustain when no one is around. And it's only then that true greatness is born. Get over yourself, the most liberating advice no one wants to hear. How ego disguises itself as insecurity. You say you're afraid of making mistakes, that you feel insecure, that you don't want to be judged. But sometimes what seems like insecurity is just ego in disguise. An ego that can't stand being seen in process, that can't tolerate the idea of appearing weak, inexperienced, imperfect. You're not afraid of failure itself. You fear others' gaze upon your failure. It's hard to admit, because the ego knows how to hide well. It dresses as humility, says it's better to wait, that it's better to prepare more, that maybe it's not your time. But deep down, it just doesn't want to be seen in a raw state, because it's still attached to image, to reputation, to the illusion of control over others' perception. Stoicism reminds us, shame is the result of attachment to image. And as long as you're a slave to the image you want to maintain, you'll never be free to become who you truly are. Because being genuine requires being ridiculous. It requires failing in front of others. It requires stumbling publicly, rising silently, and continuing, even with others' eyes still on you. Real humility isn't shyness. It's courage. Courage to show yourself incomplete, to expose your attempts, to live as a draft before becoming a book. It's the serene gesture of someone who knows that truth isn't in applause, but in the coherence between what one feels and lives. List 3 things you avoid for fear of seeming bad. Maybe singing, maybe writing, maybe public speaking, maybe declaring your feelings. 3 small things that reveal something big, how much you still limit yourself to maintain an image you don't even fully believe in. Think of a statue, firm, beautiful, untouchable. It doesn't dance, doesn't move, doesn't take risks. And because of that, it never breaks, but it also never lives. So is the soul that overprotects itself, perfect in appearance, but incapable of transformation. You don't need to be amazing, just be real, because it's in exposing your imperfection that the chance for connection resides, for growth, for truth, and sometimes freedom begins exactly there, the moment you finally stop trying to be someone and start simply being. When obsession is a sacred calling, not a flaw, the misunderstood gift of those who can't settle. There's something in you that never settled, an ancient restlessness, an intensity that seems too much for others, and at times, even for yourself. You try to contain it, say everything's fine, pretend what you have is already enough, but inside, you keep feeling there's something yet to be done, something that can't be ignored for long. And then you ask yourself, why can't I just be satisfied? Why doesn't my mind ever switch off? Why does everything in me demand more depth, more presence, more truth? And the world, with its well-intentioned advice, says, relax, slow down, don't be so intense. But they don't understand, because it's not ambition, it's vocation. For the Stoics, virtue is consistency with your daemon, that inner voice that knows where you should go, even if the path seems strange. And for some, this calling doesn't come in the form of peace, but of obsession, a focus that doesn't switch off, a repetition that borders on ritual, a commitment that doesn't need an audience. You're not exaggerated, not misfit, you just carry a fire that burns higher and needs direction. The intensity the world doesn't understand is, in fact, your compass. It's not here to hinder you, it's here to remind you who you are. Embrace repetition, not as punishment, but as right. Like a monk who prays 10,000 times, not because he wants to convince a god, but because in repetition he finds alignment, finds clarity, finds silence. You don't need to fit in, nor to soften. You just need to listen to this restlessness with more respect. Because there are souls that weren't made to live in the average. They were made to burn. And sometimes what the world calls exaggeration is just a calling not yet lived, a mission not yet named, a destiny not yet accepted. Be faithful to your intensity, because it's not a flaw, it's a beacon. And the more you deny it, the more you'll lose yourself. But when you decide to follow it, even if it seems madness to outsiders, internally, everything will start to make sense. The sacrifice no one warns you about. How purpose quietly demands the loss of comfort. Following an inner calling isn't glamorous. It's most of the time lonely, because when you start walking toward your truth, certain people begin to drift away. Not out of malice, but because your change reveals their stagnation, your clarity unsettled. settles, your focus silences, your transformation creates distance, and then comes the pain no one mentions, the loss of human connections. You no longer belong in the same places, no longer fit in the same conversations, no longer find pleasure in the same distractions, and gradually you realize that growing also means inevitably leaving those who no longer see you, leaving those who no longer hear you, leaving the comfort of being understood by everyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose your burden," and choosing purpose is choosing a weight, the weight of lonely nights, of unanswered doubts, of being misunderstood by those still living on the surface. It's the silent price of someone who decided to live with depth, even if it means giving up the apparent lightness of relationships without truth. There's guilt for no longer being accessible, for seeming distant, for no longer being so present in old spaces. But this guilt needs to be seen for what it is, a longing for the old version of yourself, not a sign of error, because every real choice requires a loss. And the loss, in this case, is part of the path. Think of a lighthouse. It's there, firm, useful, luminous, but it's alone, isolated, exposed to storms, to wind, to sea spray, and yet it remains. Because its function isn't to be accompanied, it's to guide. It doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be faithful to its light. You won't be understood by everyone, and that's okay. Depth has this side effect. It selects. Those not ready to dive drift away. But those who stay find in you not comfort, but truth. And in the end, that's what matters. Yes, you'll lose things, but you'll also gain something priceless. The alignment between what you feel and what you live, and this coherence, even if solitary, sustains you. Because when you become whole, even in silence, the world may not understand, but your soul will be grateful. Your excuses are just elegant versions of fear, while logic is often just the voice of a well-dressed coward. You say you're rational, that you need more time, that you're not ready yet, that you need stability, guarantees, ideal conditions, and it all sounds convincing, even to yourself. But deep down, something starts to stir, because what appears to be logic is just fear, well articulated. It's cowardice dressed up as wisdom. Fear doesn't scream, it reasons. It builds refined, aligned, plausible justifications. It dresses in prudence, maturity, long-term thinking. But underneath, what it really wants is to keep you where nothing hurts, where nothing challenges, where nothing exposes. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Because a frightened mind is creative. It anticipates disasters. It predicts rejection. It builds an entire world of what-ifs that paralyze. And the more you believe in these internal scenarios, the harder it becomes to act. Not because you can't, but because you've already convinced yourself that trying is too risky. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is transparency. It is the ability to look at your excuses and ask, what is the real emotion behind this? Fear of failure, fear of being seen trying, fear of losing control. Because until that root is exposed, you'll keep calling cowardice strategy. Identify one of those excuses you repeat often. It may sound reasonable, it may sound fair, but dig deeper. Ask yourself, what would happen if that excuse disappeared? What would you have to face? What would you have to feel? The truth is there. Think of a glass shield. It seems to protect. It gives a sense of safety, but any real impact shatters it, because it was never meant to handle real life. That's what your justifications are like. Beautiful, convincing, but fragile in the face of the raw truth that living demands exposure. You don't need to get rid of fear. You just need to stop hiding it behind well-crafted phrases, because only when fear is named does it lose power. And only when the truth is spoken does action become possible. Your path is not blocked by lack of ability. It's blocked by an excess of made-up stories, all invented to protect a part of you that still doesn't trust your own strength. But that strength is there, waiting for you to stop explaining and start walking, even trembling, even uncertain, even now. The weight of showing up when it hurts. How real strength is revealed in silent perseverance. There are days when your body feels heavy, your mind hesitates, your soul whispers that maybe it's better to stop. The world outside keeps spinning, unaware of what you carry within. And on these days, it's easy to justify retreating, to say you're tired, that you need a break, that you'll come back later. But there's a rare strength that's born right here when you show up, even while wounded, even in silence, even when you want to disappear. Pain is not your enemy. It is a messenger. And Stoicism reminds us, pain is not an excuse. It is an opportunity to prove to yourself, not the world, how committed you are to what you've chosen. Pain reveals whether your purpose is just an idea or already part of your identity. Good days don't demand much. It's easy to act when you're motivated, well-rested, celebrated, but true greatness is forged on the bad days. When the ground feels fragile, when no one is watching, when everything seems to conspire against you, and yet you choose to show up. You choose to keep going. You choose to endure. Choose one commitment, just one, and honor it, especially on the hard days, not as a sacrifice, but as a ritual of presence. Because every time you choose not to retreat, you're telling your soul, I'm still here, I'm still me, I'm still fighting. And that silent consistency is worth more than 1,000 grand gestures under a spotlight. Think of a wounded warrior. He bleeds, he limps, but he carries the banner to the end of the battle, not because he will win, but because he knows his presence there holds a greater meaning. He's not seeking applause, he's honoring a call. And so do you. When you choose to show up for your project, your routine, your silence, even while hurt, you're telling the world and yourself, pain may be here, but it doesn't drive. And that choice, made in the dark, is what most deeply shapes who you are becoming. Don't run from pain. Walk with it, not as an enemy, but as a witness. Because every step, even a shaky one, strengthens you in ways no comfort ever could. And down the road, you'll look back and see it was during that hard time that true strength was born. Restlessness, the soul's way of saying you're not aligned. Why boredom is rarely about lack of things to do. You've been doing everything right, following your routine, completing tasks, maintaining balance, and yet there's a discomfort that won't leave, a restlessness that appears in the silence, a chronic sense of disconnection. It's not sharp pain, it's a light emptiness, but constant, as if even surrounded by tasks, you were absent from yourself, so you try to fill it. Distract yourself, change your focus, change your environment, but the restlessness returns because it's not asking for distraction, it's asking for direction. It's your soul trying to tell you gently that you are not where you're meant to be, that something inside you has already moved on, even if your body hasn't caught up. Marcus Aurelius warned, do not waste what remains of your life. And often, the waste is not in doing too little, it's in doing too much of what no longer has meaning. It's in staying busy with things that don't nourish you, in filling time with noise when what you need is to listen. Impatience, boredom, apathy, all are symptoms of misalignment. When you live disconnected from your diamond, everything starts to feel gray. It doesn't matter how much you earn. It doesn't matter how many achievements you stack. There's a subtle absence that nothing can replace, and that absence manifests in gentle yet deadly ways. Procrastination, lack of enthusiasm, a dullness in your eyes. Be still. Not the stillness of giving up, but of listening. Stop filling every gap with more tasks. Let emptiness exist for a few minutes and observe what emerges when there's no pressure for results. What appears when the noise goes quiet. Maybe, between one breath and the next, you'll hear an ancient whisper, the memory of who you were before you became functional. Picture a compass spinning without pause. You might think it's broken, but maybe it's just in a distorted magnetic field. It hasn't lost true north. It just needs a stable environment to point clearly. So do you. You're not lost, just too immersed in the noise. Restlessness is not weakness. It's a signal, a sign that your soul still cares, that it's still awake, that it still hungers for truth. And when you stop fearing this discomfort and start listening to it with respect, you may discover it's actually your most loyal guide. Strength is not loud, it's relentless. Why consistency beats intensity every time. The idea of strength that many people carry is noisy, tied to grand achievements, visible gestures, bursts of energy. But true strength is something else. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't show off. It is repetitive, silent, steady, and that's why it's so often ignored. You believe you have to prove yourself, that you need to do something impressive for your discipline to be valid. But Stoicism teaches the wise person is consistent, not because they need to be noticed, but because they know the value of staying the course. Because they understand that what molds, transforms, and forges happens in repetition, and it is consistency that scares us the most, because it demands commitment even without emotion, even without applause, even when everything in you wants to do something else. It requires presence, clarity, quiet faith. Do you want deep change? Start with micro commitments, small actions repeated day after day until they're no longer actions. They're part of who you are. Not to prove you can, but to remind yourself daily of what matters. Think of the tide. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, but it returns day after day with almost divine precision. And it's this repetition that shapes stone, that changes the coastline, that transforms the world, not through force, but through constant presence. You don't need to be intense. You need to be faithful. Faithful to what you chose, faithful to what you know holds value even when no one sees, faithful to that inner pull that calls for continuation. Consistency doesn't shine, but it sustains, and that's what you need right now. Not more energy, but direction, not more sporadic effort, but daily devotion, because it is through the repetition of small acts that quiet greatness takes shape. And when you look back, you'll realize it was those ordinary days, carried out in silence, that made you strong, not to impress, but to endure. You are allowed to outgrow the life that made you. Why evolution often looks like betrayal? There is a subtle pain in growth, not the pain of overcoming itself, but the pain of looking back and realizing you no longer fit there, in certain places, in certain bonds, in certain old versions of yourself. And that pain gets confused with guilt because you were shaped by that life, by those people, by those cycles, and leaving them behind feels like ingratitude, but it's not. It's necessity. To grow is by definition to let go, not out of disdain, but out of coherence. There are bonds that were shelter, but now are limits. There are routines that were stability, but now are cages. There are habits that were protection, but now block your expansion. Stoicism is clear. You owe nothing to your old self except transcendence. Loyalty is not staying where you started. It's honoring the impulse that moved you to change, to rebuild, to redraw, even if that seems like betrayal to those who stayed behind. And yes, nostalgia will come, the urge to return, the temptation to shrink yourself just to fit again, but that's not love. It's fear. Fear of losing belonging, fear of no longer being recognized, fear of walking with your own light and dimming old connections. Write a farewell letter, not to people, but to the life that no longer serves you, to the pattern you keep out of attachment, to the identity that has already served its purpose. Say thank you, and then say goodbye. Think of the snake. It must shed its skin to grow, not because the skin was bad, but because it no longer fits. And if it resists that process, it suffocates in its own protection. You have the right to change, to expand, to become something else. Even if others don't understand, even if you miss the old lightness, the new version of you will hurt at first, but it will be more true, more expansive, more whole. And when that pain passes, only the relief will remain of being faithful to what you're becoming, even if it sets you apart, even if it silences you, because there's a peace that only comes after the rupture, and it's that peace that now calls you. The obstacle does not define you, the decision does. How choice, not circumstance, is where identity is forged. You've been broken, maybe more than once, by failures, rejections, abandonments. You carry invisible scars and silences no one notices, and many times you thought that was it, that the pain was the end, that the failure was final, that what remained of you wasn't enough to start again. But Stoicism reveals something else. What defines you isn't what hurt you, it's what you choose to do with it. The external world can hit you. It can take away people, certainties, resources. It can push you to the ground, steal your breath, scatter your plans. But only you can give up your soul. Only you can decide whether that pain will be a tomb or a forge. You have that power, even in the smallest decisions. Even when everything feels lost. Even when every part of you begs to stop. In that moment, something profound reveals itself. The silent decision to continue, not out of stubbornness, but out of integrity. Rewrite your story starting from the moment everything almost ended. Not as a victim, but as an author. Take the darkest, most confusing, most unjust moment and look at it as the place where you were refined, where you began to become who you're still becoming. Think of a broken sword. It was shattered, fragmented, but when reheated and hammered with intention, it returns, not as it was, but better, firmer, more its own. Now it carries the mark of the battle, the scar of the fire, the memory of transformation. You are that sword, and what broke you no longer needs to define you. The choice to remake yourself, that is what forges you in silence, in depth, in truth. The fire you feared was the same one that would make you whole. And now, walking out of it, you are no longer the same. You are deeper, calmer, more yourself, and maybe stronger than you ever imagined.